Hello, and welcome to Stories from India, a podcast where we talk about myths, legends, and folk tales from India. I am your host, Narad Muni, and I'm a mythological character myself. I have the gift of eternal life and knowledge of the past, the present, and the future. By profession, I'm a traveling musician and a storyteller. So, the way I'm doing my job is by podcast. This is episode number 100. That's a big milestone indeed. But strictly speaking, we've already done more than 100 if you include the bonus and mini episodes. I just can't thank you listeners enough for all your support. The show is going really strong, and I have a lot more stories to tell. While I have touched on all the major story categories, you know, Vikram Betal, Ramayan, Mahabharat, Panchatantra, Jatak Tales, Thanali Raman, Akbar Birbal, there are still quite a few that I'm yet to start on, like the Singhasan Battisi or the Katha Sarit Sagar. I'm also contemplating covering historical fantasy, like the original version of Chandrakanta, and historical fiction like Ponnayin Selvan. And of course, there are many regional folktales that are deeply interesting and exciting, if not mind blowing at times. Your feedback is invaluable to me. Please do let me know if there are any particular stories you would like to hear. I would love to cover those first. Now, let's move on to the show. In this episode, we are going to cover a story about Vishnu and how the famous Tirupati Balaji temple was founded. Our story starts with me. Yes, remember, I'm a bona fide mythological character myself. I was doing the usual rounds of the world. That's my job after all, traveling storyteller. So there I was, walking around the world, when I reached an ashram near the river Saraswati. A group of rishis was in a hot debate around a fire. And the debate wasn't hot because of the fire, I mean that figuratively. They were in the ancient Indian version of a family squabble about which television channel they should watch next. Only, because it was ancient India, the topic of the debate was whom to pray to in their next set of prayers. It seems that the rishis were more or less evenly divided into three camps, one for each of the Holy Trinity: Vishnu the preserver, Brahma the creator, and Shiva the destroyer. The debate was at a deadlock. No one wanted to give in. So it was that when I approached the group, 12 rishis turned to face me, and observing me, all 12 faces smiled, as if struck by the same idea. As it happened, they were indeed struck by the same idea, all at once. And here I was, a potential tiebreaker. Regardless of what I chose, I knew that I would get bad press. If I picked Brahma, people would accuse me of nepotism. You see, Brahma is my father. If I picked Vishnu, I'd be accused of favoritism as well. I'm president for life of Vishnu's fan club. And if I picked Shiva, well, maybe I might be okay. But just this year, Shiva had presented me with a Musician of the Year award. It doesn't take much for social media to twist a little fact like that into an accusation of favoritism. But it's not easy to trap me in a tricky situation like that. I have knowledge of the future too, remember? So I knew exactly how to weasel out of this situation. I'm not a rishi, I said. I can't break a tie. My vote counts for way lower than any of yours. It's still enough to tip the scales, said one pedantic rishi. I had anticipated that. Yeah, I said, but what you want is a clear winner. A victory by a tiny margin isn't a very clear victory. A gap of 6 million votes isn't enough to convince everyone in a presidential election. And here, we are just talking about a fraction of a single vote. This drew blank stares from the crowd of rishis. No wonder. I keep confusing between the future and the past sometimes. Never mind, I said. The solution is simple. You just have to talk to Brighu, I suggested. At this point, I should explain that Brighu is a Hall of Famer rishi, one of the famous Saptarishis. He's even visible in the night sky. He's one of the stars in the Big Dipper or Ursa Major constellation. Brihu was also my brother, but being a very temperamental rishi, no one would dare accuse him of favoritism. Brihu was in the vicinity, just as I had foreseen. I accompanied the rishis as they approached him. Brihu was willing to help. He promised to visit each of the three deities in turn to decide who should be worshipped next. You know, said the pedantic rishi, speaking for all, we were just hoping you'd pick one name right now. You don't have to go and visit each one. It will take forever. Honestly, it's fine. Just pick a name at random. But my brother is not one to cut any corners. Give him a task and he'll do it perfectly, regardless of all the trouble that he'll create for everyone around him. I knew what was going to happen next. That is why, when Brihu invited me to accompany him, I politely refused. I headed straight for Vishnu's home. Brihu was visiting Brahma and Shiva first. I knew that. And I also knew what was going to happen there, so I went straight to Vishnu. I reached Vishnu's home in the ocean of milk, where he was sleeping just then, within the coils of the ultimate snake, Sheshnag. Lakshmi was around. I told her what was coming, but after discussing it, we both agreed that it would not be wise to wake up Vishnu. And just as I had anticipated, Brihu showed up just then. He was looking rather chuffed. Lakshmi usually has a very calming effect on people. She asked my brother, Narad's been filling me in on what you're up to. How did it go with your dad and Shiva? She did not really need an answer because, you see, I had already told her everything. She was just playing for time, hoping that Vishnu would wake up by himself before Brihu asked for him. My brother, the Saptarishi, explained how Dad had been most disrespectful, and he had been busy talking to Mom. He didn't even answer the doorbell until after Brihu had cursed him. And by a curse, I don't just mean bad language. This was something much worse. A Saptarishi's curse can be very powerful indeed. So when Brihu said that no one on earth would worship Brahma, that's exactly what it led to. Shiva was similarly busy and was similarly cursed into not being worshipped in his normal form. That's why idols of Shiva in temples aren't the same shape as other gods who are depicted in a more human like form. What Brihu didn't know is that he had come very close to um, entering history books a little prematurely. Shiva, the destroyer, came really close to destroying my brother. All that saved him was intervention from Shiva's wife, Parvati. I did not think it was wise to point this out to my brother. Besides, it was not going to change the outcome here. Speaking of which, the conversation had gone rather dry at this point. Brihu coughed to break the silence and asked if Vishnu was around. Lakshmi, in a resigned tone, said that Vishnu was sleeping. Couldn't the Saptarishi see for himself? The coils of a snake, even the ultimate snake, aren't really built with a separate bedroom in mind. My brother had noticed, of course. He hadn't wanted to point it out himself, in case this was one of Vishnu's famous illusions, or Maya. But now that Lakshmi had admitted it, Brihu got a license to be enraged. Angrily, he stormed towards Vishnu and kicked him hard in his chest. Lakshmi's jaw dropped, and she was clearly not happy. But Vishnu did not seem to mind. The Saptarishi's kick had woken him up. He began gently massaging Brihu's feet as a sign of respect. Now, a fact that I completely neglected to mention so far is that Brihu had a third eye at the base of his foot. And Vishnu's touch instantly vaporized it. A side effect of this vaporization was that Brihu was instantly pacified. His impatience was concentrated in his third eye. And when that vanished, Brihu became calm. Now, it's a bit hard to explain how exactly that works. But one way to think about it is this. If part of your vision was constrained forever to view the insoles of your shoes, it's unlikely that you'll have a very positive view of the world. Did you just say he has a third eye that stares at his inner soul? Whispered Lakshmi. No, I whispered back. Not soul as in the spiritual or immaterial part of the human body. I meant inner soul as in the fixed part of the inside of a shoe. S-O-L-E, soul. Brihu was a lot calmer and even friendly now that he had lost his disgruntled eye. But the damage was done. Lakshmi was not happy. She thought Vishnu should have been a little forceful with Brihu. I mean, the cheek of it? Vishnu was the preserver of the entire universe. Was it fair for an ordinary mortal to treat him like this? True, Brihu was a Saptarishi, but Lakshmi was sure that a dozen different protocols were being violated here. She decided to do what she thought would solve the problem. She left home. That disappointed Vishnu. He had no idea where she went. Vishnu traveled the world looking for her. He did not find her because Lakshmi was a super powerful goddess herself and she had the ability to go into stealth mode. Despite not having much luck in locating Lakshmi, Vishnu did know that she was on Earth, and more specifically, somewhere within the borders of the Chola kingdom. That's where her last letter was postmarked from. Vishnu set up his base camp within the borders of the Chola kingdom. His base camp was inside an ant hill near a tamarind tree on the Venkat hill. Vishnu was clearly not his normal self. Anyone with divine superpowers could see that. So it was that Shiva and Brahma decided to do something to help. Instead of sending him a care package, as some others might have done, they decided to go to Vishnu's aid themselves, in person. Or rather, not as a person, but as a cow and a calf. They somehow arranged to enter the royal herd of the Chola king. And for some reason, the king personally oversaw the purchase of the cow and the calf from a merchant. Even this micromanager of a king could see that there was something special about his most recent purchase at the cattle exchange. He decided to appoint a cowherd whose full-time job it was to watch this pair. Not surprising. When you're the king, you get to indulge in such extravagances. Well, the cowherd observed something odd the very first day that he was walking the cow and the calf. The cow wandered right over to a particular anthill on the Venkat hill. There, she did something that the cowherd didn't even know was possible. She emptied her udders over the anthill. And something in the anthill seemed to be drinking the milk. The calf, meanwhile, stood around, shuffling its feet, looking awkward. No wonder. Brahma had picked a form that was completely useless to Vishnu. As usual, he had left the hard work to Shiva. After that, every day, Shiva, in the form of the cow, kept nourishing the anthill. The king was bound to notice when his micromanagement wasn't yielding milk. The cow looked healthy, and the fact that he hadn't gotten a drop of milk from her was annoying him greatly. It had to be her diet, he thought. That day, he instructed the cowherd to strictly monitor what she ate. If the cow did not yield milk, it would be the cowherd's neck. So it was that the cowherd decided to take along with him a tool. If he had bothered to simply milk the cow before going for their walk, things would have been very different for him. However, what he did was to carry an axe with him. He probably just meant to frighten the cow. Well, the cow was not going to be intimidated by that. She again began emptying her udders on the anthill. The cowherd charged at her with her axe. She ignored his bluff charge, at which the cowherd lost his temper and hurled the axe at her, not stopping to think what the king would do to him for essentially wiping out his investment. As the axe whirled through the air, rushing madly towards Shiva in the cow form, something sprang up from the anthill and intercepted it. It was Vishnu. He was shielding the cow and the calf from the brutal throw of the axe. Unfortunately, he got hit himself. The cowherd realized with a shock that this was Vishnu before him. He realized his offense was completely unpardonable. He had harmed the Lord and Preserver of the universe. He did not deserve to live in society. Morosely, he wandered off and vowed to never return. This incident, meanwhile, somehow reached the ears of the king. As if you didn't have enough examples of the king's management style, here's another. The king personally took his bow and arrows and rushed to the last known location of the cow and the calf. When he got there, he saw the cow and calf all right, but he also saw Vishnu. Vishnu was not happy with the king. And not because of his management style. Vishnu's chief grievance was that the king had created a culture in which his subjects would dare to use a weapon in a rash way. The king's punishment was to be reborn as another king. Vishnu added that out of pity, he had decided to marry the king's daughter in his next life. The king was puzzled at that. He didn't really see a downside here. Why was Vishnu calling this a punishment then? Regardless, that was exactly what happened in the future. The king was reborn as Akash Raj, and his daughter was a gift from the gods. Literally. Akash Raj and his wife had prayed for a child, and one day a baby girl came floating down to him in a river on a particularly large lotus. The king and queen decided to raise the child as their own. They called her Padmavati. Padmavati encountered Srinivas one day. Srinivas was the reincarnation of Vishnu. This was a completely normal courtship, with one tiny exception. Srinivas rescued Padmavati from being trampled by a wild elephant. Other than that, this was just your normal everyday romance. Meanwhile, do you remember the anthill where Vishnu had lived? Well, guess what? It had lost the shade of the tamarind tree now. As a farmer was passing by, he had a vision of Vishnu right there in the middle of the anthill. He also had an idea. For some reason, the farmer had the urge to feed the ants milk. Please do not try this at home, unless you have divine ants. Regular ants will probably just drown in milk. Well, in this case, when the farmer was pouring milk down the anthill, it washed away, revealing a stone statue of Vishnu, Padmavati, and Lakshmi. Now, if that wasn't a clear sign, he didn't know what was. So the farmer went about marking off the area, eventually building an entire temple around the statue. That temple is now famously known as the Tirupati Balaji temple. It's the descendants of the family of the cowherd who now manage the gates to the temple. That's all I have for this week. A few notes on the show. The story does not mention what happened with the Rishi's choice. I can assure you that Brighu chose Vishnu. But it doesn't really matter. Vishnu had moved on to focus on other things. There are many loose ends in this story. What happened to Shiva and Brahma as the calf and cow? Did they return? Also, why did Brahma really pick the form of a calf? That was so unhelpful. How did Vishnu actually manage to reconcile with Lakshmi after his anthill episode? And most importantly, whom did the rishis actually worship? One thing is for sure, the rishis weren't happy with the lead time on making a decision on whom to pray to. They decided that they would not ask Brihu, or me for that matter, to intervene. That's a good thing. They managed to sort out their differences by themselves. They did this by installing a wheel of names, a spinning wheel with labels of the deities on different sectors. The wheel is spun, and whatever a fixed pointer lands on when the wheel stops spinning, that's the deity they decided to worship. It's a lot easier to have such complicated decisions be made by nature. The Chola dynasty was a very prominent one in South India. Check out some links in the show notes if you want to learn more about it. Vishnu's Maya, or powers of illusion, featured prominently in episode 0, Rockstar. Check it out. A quick disclaimer that I featured prominently in that episode as well. There are more links in the show notes to other episodes featuring Vishnu, Lakshmi, Shiva, and Brahma, including one that has an alternative explanation for why Brahma is not worshipped in temples, typically. That's all I have for now. In the next episode, we'll go back into the Ramayana. We are going to rejoin the Ayodhya brothers, as what started as a scuffle with the Lanka brothers was now quickly escalating into a full out war. The next stage of that conflict? The second and more famous abduction of Sita. If you have comments or suggestions, or if there are particular stories that you would like to hear, please do let me know by leaving a comment or a review on the site sfipodcast.com or tweet at sfipodcast. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get notified automatically of new episodes. Thanks to all of you listeners for your continued support and your feedback. The music is from purpleplanet.com. That's purple-planet.com. I'll see you next time.